I really didn't want to do another just single card spoiler, just because I didn't think there was like any other like cards that I was like super hyped about. But I saw this card get spoiled yesterday, Nyxbloom Ancient, and everybody on like Twitter, everybody on Facebook, every sort of like MTG outlet, whether it was just a single person or it was the people that spoiled this card or things like that, they were going nuts over this card. And at first, when I saw it, I was like, yeah, it does something really powerful, but it just doesn't seem like it's going to be super playable especially in like a standard format or like Pioneer or anything like that. But in Commander, obviously, it's insane and it's busted. But then it got me to thinking, like, so what would happen with this card just in Standard, and just theory crafting ideas. So for anybody that hasn't seen this card yet, which I'd be very surprised if you haven't, Nyxbloom Ancient is a 7 mana 5/5 trampler that when you tap a permanent 4 mana, it produces 3 times that much mana instead. So basically, like your normal lands, like your shock lands and your basic lands, all tap for 3 of whatever color it produces, whether it's 3 blue, 3 black, 3 green, so on and so forth. If you have a land that taps for 2 mana, of whatever combination of colors, like the Karoo lands or the bounce lands from like the old Ravnica set, they produce 6 mana, 3 of each of the color it produced. If you have Nykthos you tap it equal to your devotion to green. If you have 8 devotion to green, you now have 24 green mana in your mana pool just from what this card does. So essentially, what are we looking at here with Nyxbloom Ancient in terms of standard? So in terms of like the standard format, like this card is like literally, if you are playing like 0 removal spells in your deck, you will probably lose to this card if your opponent decides to play it. But if you're playing any sort of like standard deck, whether it's the variations of what we have now or what's to come in the weeks after this set officially drops and we get to play with these new cards, I don't think this card like is going to leave the battlefield just as soon as it hits the table. Like, it's going to be gone. With like Murder's Rider and Noxious, all the like green hate that we have in the format for especially like green planeswalkers and like just in general like good removal we have in the format, like Nyxbloom Ancient isn't very likely to stick on the table for very long for you to use it. Obviously if you play it on turn like 9 or turn 10, then you technically net mana by playing it, because assuming you hit your land drops and you have like 3-4 lands in play, you have 9 to 12 mana, which obviously is better because you only had like 2, 3 or 4 like when you played this card on those turns. But when you play Nyxbloom Ancient and in the off chance your opponent doesn't kill it and you untap and you have 8 lands in play, obviously 8 times 3, you have 24 mana. That's a 22/22 Hydroid Krasis that draws you 11 cards and gains you 11 life, and also puts a bigger body on the table that is going to be the one to probably catch removal, because it's going to kill your opponent way faster than the Nyxbloom Ancient is. And of course, you just drew 11 cards, so there's a chance that you either drew another Krasis or that you drew another big thing. Voracious Hydra's in the format. Voracious Hydra being the double green and X spell that you can either double the counters on it or have it fight something, and it just there is insane cards. There's some really good X spells, like if you play the red spell Perforos's Intervention, you can basically make a giant elemental with trample and haste and kill your opponent that way. In like the historic format, you could play actual Banefire and kill your opponent that way, like on turn 8, like if you just don't play any ramp, like on turn 8 you could just like untap with Nyxbloom Ancient and 24 your opponent or 21 them, however much, but usually that's going to be enough to like kill them. Nyxbloom Ancient, while I think is very powerful, and obviously like the plays that I just described, like the X spells that you can play that are literally just I untap, I either actually win the game or you need to have an answer right now, and if you didn't have an answer for the Ancient, you probably don't have an answer for what I just played, or at least that you have to top deck an answer for it, makes this card very powerful in that respect, But going past that, like if you just plan on trying to like ramp into this thing, and the amount of removal in the decks that are currently very powerful in the format and everything. Even if your opponent, like, I mean, if you win a game because of this, like in a match, if you win like game one with this card, that's probably good enough, because there are other good cards in your deck that you are potentially playing alongside this one that you can just win. You can win with those cards, like in the sideboarded games. But definitely, like when we get to those sideboarded games, this card gets a lot worse. Like a 5/5 for 7, even though it has trample, really isn't that good when we have like 5 mana 5/6s, and then of course like with the 2 titans that we get spoiled, like 2 mana 6/6s or 3 mana 6/6s that cost 4 to unearth. That are probably easily going to be turned on. And the fact that you have to survive until even say like turn 4, turn 5 to play Nyxbloom Ancient with like 2 pieces of ramp. Like you invest a lot of cards to play this guy, and then you still need more cards left over. Like one X spell, like Hydrate Craces is probably like the best X spell. Like if it's going to be one that like doesn't win you the game, but like basically puts it out of reach, like drawing an extra 11, 12 cards in a single turn, and then keeping the best 7 out of those. And even if your Nyxbloom Ancient dies, who cares, because you literally just got to sculpt the perfect hand for whatever your opponent could be doing, and you're left with a 22/22 flying trampler. So while I think Nyxbloom Ancient is going to be a card that, like, if you untap with it, you either theoretically or actually win the game, I don't think it's going to see much play in Standard. It's going to be like a Commander All-Star. Any green X-based deck is going to play Nyxbloom Ancient because everybody likes playing Mana Reflection, so why not Mana Reflection with legs and on steroids? Because in that sense, like, this card is just amazing, and the fact that you can, in certain strategies, like have this out on like turn 2 or turn 3, where your opponent is very unlikely to have answers for it, and then you can just like have 9-12 mana on like turn 3 or even more, because this card is nuts and works incredibly well with lands that produce more than just one color of mana on their own, or with other effects and things like that. So realistically, Nyxbloom Ancient, very powerful. Will it see Standard play or Pioneer, anything like that outside of like the EDH format? It probably will. There will be people like trying to play this card because, again, like huge Hydrate Craces and Voracious Hydra in Standard, really, really good. Being able to Banefire or Perforos's Invention, like in Standard for Perforos's Intervention, or like Banefire in like the historic format and things like that. Very powerful, very good. Will either actually win you the game on the spot, or obviously you win next turn if your opponent can't answer the big thing that you play or the big thing that you just played. But aside from that, like, this card isn't going to do much for me. I'm probably not going to play within Standard unless there's like a deck that I would enjoy playing that this card would be played in, or if there's any like cool X spells besides like the 2 that I pointed out for the Standard format and like the other 2 for historic. That being said, definitely pick up this card if you're an EDH player. Like, this is just going to be a slam dunk. Like, every green deck is going to want to play this card, because obviously ramp is king in EDH, and especially when you just ramp 10 times harder than like anybody else at the table, you're probably going to win or have a really, really, really good chance of winning. And so that is my evaluation of Nyxbloom Ancient. Again, I can't say this enough, and I don't want people to think I'm hating on this card. It is very powerful. It has a powerful ability stapled to it. I just don't think, for the terms of the constructed formats that I play and that I focus on, like my channel and stuff, you probably won't see this card out of some like, unless you're playing like some fringe decks or some fringy type archetypes and things like that. I just don't think it's aggressive enough. I think it enables like the other cards, but there are other cards that you would be willing to play, and I don't think cutting other playable cards to play this guy to hopefully play this faster than your opponent is able to answer it after they've tried to answer all of your other threats is just going to be a good strategy and a viable one in Standard, at least in like the first few weeks of the format, trying to figure out what's going on. So that's going to do it for this video. If you enjoyed this one, I have a few other Theros Beyond Death cards that I talk about that I'm a lot higher on than Nyxbloom Ancient, even going over a certain Titan that is probably going to take over Standard once we actually get it in the format. And also leave a like on this video if you enjoyed, if you got any useful information out of it. I'd be greatly appreciated. Feel free to subscribe to the channel too. I'm going to be doing a lot of Theros Beyond Death stuff. I do a lot of deck techs for the Pioneer and Modern format, as well as streaming on Twitch, where I play a lot of just other video games and stuff like that to break up the Magic stuff. I mean, sometimes we need to like take a small break and things like that, and I think a fun way of doing it is just playing video games, hanging out in the stream, and just in general just chilling out. Like, that's my favorite part of Twitch. And yeah, that's gonna do it for me. I thank you guys for watching the video, and I'll see you on the next one.